Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala al-ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to talk today about something which is very important, and that is the issue of al-Qiyas. So sometimes we might hear a scholar explain, well, this issue doesn't have a clear evidence from the book and the sunnah. However, we can make qiyas. This might be confusing to some people who don't know what this concept is. Okay, so qiyas is one of the established sources of legislation in al-Islam. And qiyas is translated usually as analogy, to form an analogy between two different things. Qiyas has four components, right? Four components. We have the asl, which is the original established mas'ala, which is established by the Quran or Sunnah. Then we have the fara', meaning the subsidiary or the branch, which is the new issue which we are trying to link to the established issue. Then we have the illah, which is a characteristic which joins the two issues together. And then the fourth pillar of qiyas is the hukm, meaning that the first issue must have an Islamic ruling, i.e. is it haram, is it obligatory, is it makruh, is it wajib, mustahab? Yeah, it must have a ruling. So these are the four pillars of al-qiyas. So if we give an example, it will become clear. We have, number one, we have wine, al-khamr. And we know that khamr has a hukm, which is tahrim. To drink alcohol is haram. Okay, to drink alcohol is haram. Then we have a new issue which has come up. Certain intoxicants that didn't exist at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like cocaine, narcotics, and the such. So, what characteristic in khamr made it haram? Well, we know that it's the fact that it intoxicates. Nabi alayhi sallam said, "Kullu muskirin khamr, kullu khamrin haram." So every intoxicate is khamr and every khamr is haram. So we know that it intoxicates. Narcotics, such as cocaine, heroin, and the such, they intoxicate. Okay? So they are linked with this illah. It's a jami'. It links these two together. Therefore, this second issue will take the ruling of the third issue. So this is how qiyas works. We have an established ruling in Islam. We have a new issue which comes up. There's an attribute in the established ruling which leads to this ruling, whether it's prohibition or obligation and so on. So this second new issue, if it has the same attribute, it will follow it in that ruling. So for example, another example, in the Hanbali school, the illah, or the reason for an item being ribawi, being an item in which riba is involved, is any product or item that is, when we make a transaction, is weighed or with a measuring cup, makil. So kullu makilin wa mawzun. So everything which we know, if we scoop it to weigh it, like dates, like wheat, bur, yeah, in the time of Rasulullah sallam, they would scoop it when they sell it, right? Or anything that's weighed, such as gold, silver, and such. So in the Hanbali school, they view that this is the illah. This is the reason for it being ribawi, so i.e. the reason for it being haram to have a transaction with tafadul, meaning I can't give the amount of dates for double the amount of a different type of date. There has to be the same amount, and the transaction has to be hand by hand in the same sitting. Okay? You have to complete the transaction, the qabd, in the same sitting. Okay. So what about rice? In the Hanbali school, well, rice would be sold in the same way. It's makil, right? So here, rice would be considered ribawi. So you couldn't swap 2 kilos of rice for 4 kilos of rice, for example. Okay? Because the illah, or the reason for riba, exists in rice. But what about cars, for example? If I was to swap 1 car for 2 cars, swap a Mercedes for 2 Hondas, for example, would this be riba according to this school? No, because when we commit a transaction with a car, right, you buy a car by numbers: 1 car, 2 car, 3 car. You don't weigh the car, right, or measure the car. So swapping cars, 1 car for 2 cars, would not be considered riba. Why? Because the illah for riba does not exist in the car. So we do not make qiyas of the car for the dates and the wheat and so on and so forth, or gold and silver. So the qiyas is not made here. So a lot of the time with modern issues, the reason that scholars may differ, okay, so we have to have a more tolerant understanding of this, why scholars differ. It's not that a scholar is necessarily going against the Quran and Sunnah. It's that sometimes in some modern issues, they disagree on what the actual illah is for a mas'ala, for a ruling. And sometimes they disagree whether this illah is present in the new issue.